This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
11 o'clock Friday morning it is. The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Tyler and Wes along with you. I think Chris might be joining us for buy or sell, but he did not confirm that to me. He did ask what time we were doing it, so maybe he'll join us, but who knows?
Context clues, I took that to mean he is joining us.
That's what I thought, but
from a journalistic standpoint, it was never completely confirmed.
Well, Dave, just be on the lookout for the phone at like 11:15. He might call, he might not. Either way, we'll get through this hour if Chris is with us or not. Anyways, we are getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores. Coming up tomorrow at noon, pregame coverage starting right here on the game at 7 a.m. Terry and I out at the party lot at Sound and Images going until 9. The network coverage kicks in, leading you up until kickoff. At noon, as the Gamecocks look for their second win in a row en route to getting to 6-6 on the season to get to bowl eligibility. And this Vanderbilt team coming in here on a losing skid of their own at 2-8 on the season. Just looking for any kind of semblance of a glimmer of hope to round out this year. Coming into year number 3 for Clark Lee and Vanderbilt, there was hope, there was optimism, and I talked with Chris Lee of VanderbiltSports.com in the 9 o'clock hour, and, you know, those 2 wins last year against Kentucky and Florida in consecutive weeks, I think set people's bar of expectations a little bit high for what Vanderbilt could accomplish in year number 3, and they've obviously come back down to earth quite a bit, and again, come into Williams-Brice tomorrow really with nothing to lose, it seems like.
Yeah, I feel like, I'm sure if you're a Vandy fan, last year you started to let yourself dream a little bit. And, you know, man, this is a program that just, I felt like was known for finding a way to lose games. Mm-hmm. And dude, I mean, go back to the game 2 years ago, right down the road at Williams-Brice Stadium, snatching a loss from the jaws of victory from the Vanderbilt side. Now, South Carolina side, credit where it's due for making something happen at the end. Great story. Zeb Nolan comes in, leads you down the field. Xavier Legette, before he was the Xavier Legette, going up, making a play in the back of the end zone. You know, it was one of those things South Carolina fans probably remember from year one here of Shane Beamer. But, man, Vandy, like from their perspective, that was your best chance to win an SEC game in a long time. And then so they stay the course. They win a couple of games in SEC play last year, but they just have not been able to carry that momentum over. And some of it, I think, not that I, frankly, to be honest, I don't watch a lot of Vanderbilt football. They're not must-see TV. They're not
usually.
They're not one of those games where if you're not watching the main team you watch, that you're just like tuning in to see it, kind of like some of the other top SEC schools and teams. But, I look at them, and even when they have something good going, it's very hard for them to maintain it. Ray Davis, for example, had a huge game against South Carolina for Vanderbilt last year. We're going to see Ray Davis face South Carolina next week.
That's right.
Instead of this week. And so that's got to be demoralizing.
Sure.
To go out and find a guy and recruit him. And, I'm assuming he wasn't really that highly recruited. You did a great job of evaluation and development. And then, guess what? He's going to go play for a division opponent. And so for Vandy, it's hard for Vanderbilt anyway. But, man, I think in this era of college football,
sure,
it makes it even more difficult on Vanderbilt.
Well, and Vanderbilt's kind of always been seen as the doormat of the SEC, and sure, they have their wins here and there, but routinely most people look at their schedule and say, oh, Vanderbilt, that's going to be an easy win, because more often than not, that usually ends up being the case, and obviously South Carolina has a very long winning streak with them going all the way back to 2009. And mentioning a guy like Ray Davis, he's not the first one to use Vanderbilt as a stepping stone to get to a better opportunity. Obviously, James Franklin had that program in a pretty respectable place about a decade ago, and he used that to springboard to the Penn State job, where he's getting set for a top 10 matchup tomorrow coming up against Michigan. And I thought it was interesting, one of the few bright spots they do have on their team from a talent perspective this year is Will Sheppard at wide receiver, their leading receiver, one of the upper receivers in the SEC overall. And talking to Chris Lee a little bit earlier, he even said he seems like he's checked out this season, which again, when you're 2-8, you can understand that. Seems to be going through the motions a little bit, and obviously will have aspirations to the next level, but he may not even be on his best game coming up tomorrow.
So I knew Chris Lee a little bit from when Gamecock Central was with Rivals. That guy calls it like he sees it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he calls it. He's not a sugarcoat type person, and so I actually would be curious to go back and hear what he had to say, because he generally is very tied in at Vanderbilt and kind of has a good feel for what's going on. And so, I think this is another game for South Carolina. I kind of equate it to the Mississippi State game when they're coming in. And honestly, the Florida game as well, which was a missed opportunity for South Carolina. It's so difficult. Your schedule is so difficult. You have to take advantage of the games where you are favored, you have more talent, you're at home. You cannot let those opportunities pass you by, because the rest of your schedule has been so hard, and you have not really been able to steal that win yet, where everybody said you were going to lose and you just stole that victory. And so you're kind of already behind the 8 ball due to the Florida loss. Again, we don't have to go back through that. Everybody was there, everybody saw it. But you're literally right around a 2-touchdown favorite against an SEC team. It's at home. You're not fully healthy if you're South Carolina, but you, for the most part, have your pieces that you've gotten used to having out there. You got to take advantage and win. And you need to play well to kind of springboard into the final 2 weeks as well.
South Carolina got back on the track last weekend, taking down Jacksonville State to end their 4-game losing skid. Coach Beamer last night on Carolina Calls reflected on what he saw on the tape versus Jacksonville State in that victory.
Coach Beamer being shy
again.
Some,
disappointing things in all 3 phases. For the second week in a row, we had a punt where we interfered with the punt returner. Hadn't done that, I don't think, in 3 seasons, and we've now done it back-to-back weeks. We had 12 men on the field one time defensively trying to get a sub off. We had the week before against A&M, we had 10 men on the field, I think, for an extra point. So getting that, offensively, we talked all week that we're going to try and utilize the snap count, and if we're going to hard count them, and if they jump, we need to come across the line and touch them so we can get a free 5 yards, and we did it. And both sides of the defensive line for them jumped, and the right tackle and the left tackle, we didn't move. So all that is just disappointing things. It starts with me, and I'm the head coach, that we had talked about, that we did during the week, that for whatever reason we just didn't get it executed the right way on Saturday, and there's different reasons for that. And fortunately, we won the game and can learn from it and coach it better and be better this week as well. And that's what we've talked about a lot about this week, is just everybody on our team just taking ownership of what they're responsible for. We all need to be better.
Obviously, you got back in the win column, which was the overall goal this past weekend against Jacksonville State, but plenty of things to clean up. And while it's easy to focus in on, the yardage given up, from the defense, especially when it came to run the game, he mentioned it at the beginning. There are a lot of procedural things, guys on the field, penalties, those kind of things. That's been a mark of this team this entire season that still, unfortunately, almost through the entire regular season, you're still having trouble with.
Got to be so frustrating for a coaching staff. And man, so that play where Jacksonville State jumped off sides and the O-line, there have been issues this year at times where the O-line has themselves obviously had false starts, and then they looked like statues when when Jacksonville State jumped off sides. And then you have that thing where the guys jump back and then they reset and the fans are going, throw the flag. And you're like, well,
you don't get a free play.
You don't get a free play unless either the O-line jumps or you snap the ball. And so, that was a situation where, especially with a quarterback like Spencer Rattler, it feels like a small thing. Like in the moment, it is a small thing. But if you play it out, who knows with a truly free play, if you just snap the ball and Leggett just goes deep, who knows what could happen in those scenarios? It's not going to happen every time, but
half redneck, half posh. 100% fun. Trey Croward and Corey Ryan Forrester try and learn fancy culture in putting on airs.
The host of the Medium Popcorn Podcast, Brandon Collins and Justin Brown.
Okay, so Paddington 2 had like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for you.
You guys ruined that?
Justin came in and took it down 2 points because of his rating. That's the time we started getting death threats.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I didn't know. People worship that movie.
Putting on airs. The podcast is on YouTube and wherever you listen.
At Southern Company, we know the right solutions start with the right questions. How do we deliver reliable energy and overcome unpredictable challenges? How do we get to net zero carbon emissions and ensure communities thrive? How do we deliver affordable energy today and tomorrow? Southern Company, building the future of energy.
If 1 out of 10 times you get a free touchdown out of it, those things matter. So I think that was yet another example of the small things adding up, man. And I think, when you have, a situation where, I think there was a little bit of a something was off the timing. One of those plays down near the goal line late in the game, too, the final drive where they had to kick the field goal. The little things when you're not just a loaded football team just add up on you. And I think that's the frustrating part for South Carolina's coaches right now, probably the team as well. We talked about it, Texas A&M. And Beamer himself said, he was like, there's 15 or 16, and I kind of putting pieces together, probably small things, but they just add up.
Right.
And that's been the problem with this team really the last couple of weeks. They still were able to win against Jacksonville State. I don't think you can beat Kentucky or Clemson with those number of kind of tiny mistakes.
Anytime we go into a game, we're obviously talking about the offensive line, which is, healthier than normal going into this game at least. Here's what Coach Beamer had to say about the O-line last night.
And Rashawn's been awesome this year. Actually, I talked to his high school coach up in Virginia today, and that's what he and I were talking about, is just very few guys could go from being your starting center for 7 games or whatever he was, or 6 games, and then go to right tackle, then go to left guard. He's just a good athlete and can do everything. So we'll look at, essentially the way we had started the game previously. I mean, going with, you got Tree and Ja'Kai and Nick and Tro. And Vershawn, you feel good about. And then you've got Sidney Fugar in there and Tyshawn Wanamaker that can do some different things. John Darius Morgan continues to come along. So we're not where we need to be, but we haven't been all year. And it's game 10, so we need to figure it out, and we will.
And quickly roping this into the injury report from last night, both Trey Jones and Cason Henry going to be out. You really feel for Cason Henry because he had just come back and played a little bit last weekend against Jacksonville State. Did leave that game with the injury, but re-aggravated it once again in practice this week. So he's out, but you do have Ja'Kai Moore back and healthy. Rashawn Lee good to go as well. And as he mentioned there, you might have that same starting 5 that you had a week ago with the ability to mix in Fugar, Wanamaker, maybe even a John Darius Morgan if you decide to do that. So better than we've seen at times this year at least.
Yeah, they. So we talked about this last Thursday or Friday. What combination are they going to go with? They finally had some options, and they really rotated Tree and Cason Henry a decent amount early on at that left tackle spot. But then, man, you see him hobble off, you see Ja'Kai hobble off, and you're just like, here we go again, right back to kind of just being forced. Hey, these are your 5 or 6 guys, and that's it. John Darius Morgan did get in there a little bit at left guard, but they ultimately had to move Rashawn back to left guard last week after they sort of settled in during the break in between drives. But sounds like they want to go with that same starting 5 that they did the beginning of last week. And it kind of sounds like they want to settle in with Vershawn at right tackle. And, I think Ja'Kai is definitely more of a guard than a tackle. They seem to think that as well. So we'll see if they can settle in with that exact 5 and keep them out there for a full game, which has been, almost impossible, it seems like.
Absolutely. And, again, fingers crossed that they can get through the whole game tomorrow without any issues. Coming up, it's our favorite segment of the week. It is Buy or Sell. Chris actually going to be joining us on the Love Chevrolet phone lines for this week's edition as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on football. Welcome back. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Wes along with you, Captain Dave as well in the Herndon Chevrolet studios. And on the Love Chevrolet phone lines, we do have our guy, Chris Clark, joining us for our favorite segment of the week. It is time for Buy or Sell. Hit it, Dave.
Come on, Dave. Play that in sync.
We can't do it without it. There it is. All right, now we can do Buy or Sell.
We can start now.
Yes, we can't. We have to have the song. It's the rules.
Chris Clark, are you with us, buddy?
I'm here, guys, and I'm actually live from the campus of Yale University, former home of Nick Gargiulo.
Wow.
That is.
Just flexing on us, man.
And current home of South Carolina quarterback commit Dante Reno's father, right?
That's right, head football coach at Yale. Yes, I actually just went and met with Dante Reno at his high school at Cheshire Academy earlier this morning. Big game for him coming up tonight. And so I've had a nice visit up north.
Chris likes to use big words. He's going to come back with just a whole list of new big words next week.
Yeah. You are you getting kind of? I've been watching Suits lately on Netflix. Are you getting you a honorary degree from Yale while you're up there, Chris? Or
no? I'm very positive that nobody at Yale has any idea who I am. But I could walk around and say I know Nick Gargiulo. That might earn me some points, or Tony Reno.
Honestly, it might. Matter. Very true.
I got a feeling, and we got to get to Buy or Sell here, but I got a feeling there are some good Nick G stories up there. Just a hunch.
Circulating. There's no doubt.
Some great campus stories. Shout out to Nick. I'm sure he's not listening, but one of our favorite guys, I think, on the team. All right, let's get into Buy or Sell, brought to you by Kendall Walsh. I'll tell you more about Kendall and what she's all about here in a second. But, guys, we got to start with Xavier Legette. I'm not going to do any Xavier Legette impersonations. I'll leave that to y'all and Dow Loggins. But sitting at 973, I believe earlier this year, one of y'all posed the question, will Legette end up being South Carolina's leading receiver this year? I think he's got that one pretty much locked up in the bag. Probably has 1,000 yards locked up in the bag, 27 yards short right now. I think we would all buy that it's going to be tomorrow.
Sure.
Buy or sell, Legette hits 1,000 yards for the season in the first quarter tomorrow for the Gamecocks. Chris, you're up first.
That's the easiest buy of the year. That's almost like working with Kendall Walsh on a real estate deal. That's how easy it is.
Oh, man. Okay, Chris, buy or sell the first drive.
Gosh, you're taking it to the next level.
Well, if it's that easy.
Yards.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem, Chris.
Okay.
All 27 yards are going to come on one. Like, it's going to be on a 50-yard bomb if history is any indication. So he could be quiet for a quarter and then get them all, I feel like, which is why it's hard to predict. Like, chances are I'll buy this as well. But, I mean, I could see him just having a quiet quarter and then having 100 yards in the second quarter. Like, this offense has been very explosive dependent, I feel like.
Yeah, and I should have gone back and, pulled well. And in 7 games this year, Xavier Legette had, 50 yards on the first drive or in the first quarter. I could have done that, but I didn't. But, I'm going to just go with the gut and say, yes, he gets it done in the first quarter. I think that would be the easier pick. Now, first drive, I don't know if I'm as convicted of that, but if I had to pick, I'll buy that too.
I'll buy it, and you know what? I'll go first drive, and I'll go even further. I'll go first reception on the first drive. They go ahead and hit the bomb for a touchdown at that, and he gets over 1,000 yards.
Good grief. Okay, Tyler.
All right, Tyler, how about first play? No, I'm just kidding. We won't go that far.
Okay, maybe I won't go that far.
I'll sell on that. But I think we're all buy-in that he gets it early. Yep. Very cool moment for him, obviously, just 27 yards away. And for as good as South Carolina has been at the wide receiver position in their history and certainly in their last, 2 decades, this is still a very, not everybody hits that 1,000-yard mark in a season. So very, very special for X and hopefully is something that the fan base appreciates and will sort of honor and acknowledge tomorrow. All right, so Vandy, we know, if you look at the stats, they don't do a whole lot well, frankly.
Right.
There's a reason why they have the record they do. But they do create turnovers. South Carolina, a team that was bad at giving the football away last year, has cleaned that up a ton this year. South Carolina, a team defensively that has not created a bunch of turnovers but did create 4 last week. Buy or sell, we'll go to you again first, Chris. South Carolina will win the turnover battle against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, something does have to give there, right? I think South Carolina just, 10 turnovers all year offensively, which is a pretty good number. Vandy in the top 4th or top 3rd of the SEC, I think top 4th in turnovers generated on defense. Something's got to give. I'm going at home. I think South Carolina continues their trend. They take care of the football, and I've got them winning the turnover battle. I will buy that.
Chris buys. Tyler, what you thinking?
I'll buy as well because, again, as good as Vanderbilt is at taking the ball away, they're also pretty careless about turning it over themselves. As you mentioned, South Carolina's done a good job of cleaning that up this season, particularly with Spencer Rattler making a whole lot more smarter throws. So I'll buy South Carolina winning the turnover margin.
I got to do better with these, y'all. If we're just all going to buy. It's very bad. I feel like selling out of principle. I could see this thing pushing, which then would be a sell, the way it's worded. But my gut is to buy. No, my gut is to buy as well, especially in Columbia. I feel like if they were dealing with that raucous Vanderbilt environment, then that might be a different story. But had to get in my one shot at Vandy.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right.
We caught it.
Yeah, South Carolina currently a 13.5-point favorite in this game, by the way. Before we get to the end of the game, halftime. Ooh. Buy or sell, South Carolina is up by more than a touchdown at the half.
More than a touchdown. Chris, you go first.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I don't think it's going to be at any point in this game just a blowout, not in the first quarter, not in the fourth, and not at halftime. And so, but yeah, I will buy the Gamecocks being up by more than one touchdown.
So I have them covering the spread, and we'll get to our scores at the end of the show. But for the sake of being different, I'll sell the halftime score of more than 7.
Okay, I think I'm going to sell as well. I think South Carolina will be up. More than 7. It really feels like, and maybe last week is still stuck in my head, it feels like one of those games where maybe South Carolina goes up early, but then Vandy kind of just hangs around a little bit, hangs around just enough. South Carolina has been good for the most part, in first quarter, especially offensively, at kind of their scripted portion of the game. So I think that maybe goes back to they're probably even going to dial something up for Leggett, getting back to our first question as well. So I could see South Carolina jumping on them. They jumped on them 2 years ago. Vandy, I think, is going to try to throw the ball around on this defense and try to have more success against the secondary. So it'll maybe even out South Carolina ultimately pulling away in the second half, in my opinion. So, all right, Tyler, you and I can give our scores
at the
end.
Yep.
Chris, first of all, my final question was, do you buy or sell South Carolina by 14 or more? Because the spread is 13.5 right now. So answer that, but then also, if you want, man, go ahead and give us your prediction on the game.
Yeah, because of my score prediction that I'll give here in a sec, I will buy that. I think the Gamecocks, again, not a blowout, but at the end of the day, in the fourth quarter, ends up being a comfortable win, I think. Not like last week where you get a last-minute pick six that kind of seals it for you. I've got the Gamecocks 37 and Vanderbilt 20, so a 17-point margin for South Carolina, so I'll buy.
He's consistently nailing that 37, 38 points that they manage to score at home every single time.
Hey, that's the pattern, and so I'm gonna, to try to be accurate. I'm gonna stick in that range.
Well, there you go. All right, that'll do it for Buy or Sell for this week. Chris, thanks for carving out some time where you're getting a great education up there at Yale for the afternoon.
I'll bring back some knowledge for Monday, guys.
There you go.
Come back with one Nick G story for us.
At least.
I do need to do that. You do some research. I'll hit the library, see what I can find out.
Boom, there you go. All right, that was Chris Clark up there at Yale doing the research up there. Hopefully have some Nick G stories for us come Monday. With the keys of the game coming up as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on here on a Football Friday on the Game. Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on this Football Friday, here on the Game, we'll hear from Coach Beamer and his keys to the game in just a moment. We want to hear about your keys to the game. Head on over to 1075 The Game's Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now, as we do have a new poll up. The most important key for the Gamecocks to beat Vanderbilt Saturday will be, your options are Rattler having a big day, winning the turnover margin, improved tackling, or offensive line stability. Right now, improved tackling currently winning at 44%.
Ooh, really?
And, when you think about Vanderbilt's ability to create explosive plays, and I looked this up, Ken Seals doesn't throw the ball too deep as far as like throwing it past 20 yards. So a lot of that is a guy like Will Shepherd catching it in space, making guys miss. And against South Carolina, last weekend against Jacksonville State, once again, really struggling making some of those open field tackles.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I think that's a key. I actually don't think missed tackles has been the top reason for this defense's issues this year. They've had certain games where they've struggled to tackle opponents. Clayton White even talked about it last week. There were situations where you could be in a much better third down situation by just making a tackle on second down. So, yeah, it is a factor. I think South Carolina actually, last I checked, analytically is kind of middle of the pack in the SEC as far as missed tackles, like not towards the bottom, which maybe is surprising to some people. For me, it's more about when the ball's in the air, go make a play on the ball. But, yeah, I get it. And very curious to see what Coach Beamer's keys to this game are.
For decades, Rolling Stone has set the bar for entertainment publications. Today, Rolling Stone Music Now takes over in podcast form.
We have Michael Azerrad, who was Nirvana's very first biographer. I'm not sure how many people realize how many of the best songs on In Utero were written way beforehand.
To be fair to Kurt, he was also a new father. There was a lot of stuff distracting him. It wasn't just drugs, although that was certainly a major factor.
Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you listen.
Let's hear what he had to say last night on Carolina Calls.
Yeah, turnovers will be critical, obviously, like we talked about. We need to get more, continue to create them like we did last week, and continue to do a good job of protecting the ball. And Vanderbilt's been a team, like we talked about, that's had some issues from that standpoint, but they do a great job taking it away. So that'll be a key. It's always big, but it'll be big on Saturday. And then, we need to do a good job of adjusting to whatever it is, their plan is with the quarterbacks, and are they playing both of them? Are they playing one, and what their plan is? So need to get off to a good start. We got off to a good start last year up in Nashville against them, and certainly need our fans. 3 home games left in Columbia, and they're a difference. And when anytime a team goes on the road in the SEC, it's a challenge, and we need our fans to do their part and make it a even bigger challenge.
And we talked about the turnovers there in the buy or sell segment because, again, that's one of the few things that this team in Vanderbilt does really, really well. But the quarterback thing is interesting that he brings up, and I listened to a little bit of Clark Lee's availability yesterday to the media, and he said all 3 quarterbacks are on the table to potentially play tomorrow. Again, Kenny Seals has started most of this latter half of the season. A.J. Swan is healthy enough. So he's dealt with some injuries early on in the season, had some turnover issues himself, but also Walter Taylor, who they've started to bring in these past couple games to run the football a little bit. He's 6'7", so that obviously provides a little bit of a matchup problem there when you talk about especially those short yardage situations, which, again, South Carolina struggled with quite a bit last weekend against Jacksonville State. So if you get Vanderbilt into a 3rd and 2 or a 3rd and 1, I wouldn't be surprised to see number 2 trotting on the field to get those bully yards there on those 3rd and shorts.
Yes, it's kind of interesting when you look at their depth chart, and their depth chart is actually pretty extensive in the information it has. You look at the quarterback position, and it shows the games that these guys have played in and the games that they've started, like that number. And so they have several guys at the position, and honestly, Kenny Seals, A.J. Swan, my brain like confuses like they're the same player in my head.
Pretty much.
And so both those guys have started games, and both those guys have, been in a position to try and take over that position, take over the spot. And right now for Vandy, it appears Ken Seals is their guy. Like he's played in 25 career games. He started 21 career games. So he's their guy that's going to be out there most of the time. And then I think if he were to like go down or he had to come out, A.J. Swine would probably be the guy that would take most of the snaps. But Walter Taylor has kind of been that change of pace guy for them. Like you mentioned, the size there, the ability to run. I think he only threw 3 passes last week, but he's been a part of what they do. And certainly down distance and then where you are on the field, looking at, like you said, South Carolina, some of their issues, stopping short yardage situations, you got to think he's going to be a big part of what they try to do on offense. Even it may not even be in the sheer volume of plays where, like, you might look back and be like, oh, he played 12 snaps. That's not, even 25% of all their snaps. But as far as impact, he could have a big impact on this game. And I think for South Carolina, they certainly, as we heard, Lenora Sellers is kind of playing that role, scout team this week. Mm-hmm. It'll be very important. But also just as important, can you just avoid being in those spots? It kind of goes back to the success rate metric, which is a way that the analytical nerds, I say that lovingly, kind of found a way to put into math terms, are you staying on schedule as an offense? Or if you're a defense, are you keeping them off schedule? South Carolina's defense for much of the year, too many times, has allowed the opponent to stay sort of on schedule or ahead of schedule in terms of down and distance to go. And so I think that's once again another key this week for South Carolina.
One key that we talked about last week that at least through that first drive it looked like South Carolina is going to be able to accomplish, but then the offense sputtered a little bit, was starting fast. And, we said, hey, if you can jump up on Jacksonville State, 14-0, 17-0 or something like that, and really force them to have to maybe get away from what they're comfortable with, that could be a big key with having a comfortable win. Obviously, that didn't happen. And this Vanderbilt team, again, when it comes to being really good at turning the ball over, a lot of the turnovers have come and not necessarily in opportune positions where they could turn the game around or, tie the game up or something like that. So jumping on them early, and I know we talked about we didn't think they're necessarily going to have more than a touchdown lead at halftime, but if you can get out to an early lead, that could obviously, again, be a key to having a comfortable victory tomorrow.
Well, and they've been, like I said earlier, they've been really good in the script part of the game, I feel like. So they've come out, and I remember lots of times last year it felt like lots of slow starts on offense and that they didn't score touchdowns in the first quarter very often of games. There was a stretch, I can't remember what game broke it. There was a stretch where they had kind of scored, I think in the first quarter, scored touchdowns in the first quarter of every game. And, so they've started pretty quick in terms of that. Last week, it felt like they were going to be off to that quick start because the first drive,
was great.
That was fantastic. You're running it, you're throwing it, you have balance. And then the second or third drive, they're out to midfield and it kind of, or almost at midfield, and it kind of just sputtered from there. And then you had a couple of times where a lot of times it was kind of shooting themselves in the foot, it felt like, in some procedural things. And that you had the Juju McDowell tackle for loss, or if he can get past the one guy who one-arms him, as Dal Loggins said, he's probably still running to this day. And so, I thought it was little things again for them there. They played pretty well offensively off the bat against Vandy last season. Now, Vandy was scoring on them offensively, too. They were running the football very, very well. 2 seasons ago, even though it came down to that mess at the end, South Carolina actually jumped out in that game. Another reason you maybe circle turnovers as being the big issue, South Carolina had, off the top of my head, I remember a Marshawn Lloyd fumble. I remember a Jaheim Bell fumble. I remember a couple of Luke Doty interceptions. It was turnovers. I think they had 4 turnovers in that game. So that kept Vanderbilt in it when South Carolina they were in position to go up big in that game. Vandy will give you some chances to blow them out. But if you don't, much like Jacksonville State, they are going to sort of fight back, I think, and they have a way of hanging around. They lose almost all of their SEC games by about 2 to 3 touchdowns. And it seems like this Vandy team struggles to get that number down to where they're in striking distance, but also opponents of theirs struggle to really truly just blow them out and beat them by 5 touchdowns or something. So most of their games, I think they've lost all their conference games by 16 or more.
That sounds right. Let me see.
I think Auburn beat them by 16.
Yeah, so that Auburn was 31-15. They kind of came back a little bit late in that game, but just kind of glancing over it here, looks like their closest conference loss was
Auburn.
Auburn. Looks
so
like that was the
everybody kind of beats them by a little above 2. Even Georgia hung around. I think that was an 18-point game.
17-point
game.
And they got a late, almost pick 6 in that game, so that even skewed it a little bit. But, yeah, routinely went losing by 17 to 20-ish points.
So it's kind of no matter what happens in between, some of it is sometimes late in the game where they cut it a little bit closer.
Right.
You can count on about a 2 to 3 touchdown Vandy loss, it feels like.
Exactly. And again, that's our keys to the game. We'll give our final thoughts and our score predictions as we wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on a Football Friday here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Wes along with you for a few more minutes, wrapping things up, getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up tomorrow. Myself and Terry Ford taking over the halftime show, and then Jay and Elijah for the afternoon show today. And don't forget, all day long we are doing our Veterans Day Takeover sponsored by All American Heating and Air and the South Carolina Veterans Museum. I read a story of one of our veterans at 10:30. We'll have another one coming up for you in the 1 o'clock hour and another one in the 4 o'clock hour before Jay and Elijah give away those tickets to Carolina and Clemson coming up in the 5 o'clock hour today on the afternoon show. Quickly, I know we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about the offensive line with Trey Jones and Casey Henry being out. I want to hit some of the other injuries that Coach Beamer touched on last night. You're not going to have to carry on Joyner coming up tomorrow. Juice Wells continues to be out, though it does sound like Trey Knox is good to go. Though, if he's on a little bit of a pinch count, I wouldn't be surprised given the fact that he's dealing with the hamstring injury.
Yeah, and that actually does kind of affect things a little bit there because you have some decisions to make from a personnel standpoint. And I thought it was kind of fascinating listening to Dow Loggins. I ended up writing about it, talk about how rather than have to change things for everybody else on the offense, Dakereon Joyner and Juju McDowell kind of learned new positions.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I understood it is basically when they were in those 3-back looks, Joyner is just taking on the role that the second tight end would have taken on if they would have been in 2 tight ends. And Juju is out there playing the F, which is the slot position within their scheme. And so basically, rather than saying, hey, guys, everybody huddle in, we're installing a new formation, we haven't done this all year, for everybody else, it kind of stayed the same. And you said, look, Joyner, you're doing something new and different on these plays. And Juju, you're doing something new and different on these plays. And it really, because they were able to have that versatility and overall understanding of the offense, it gave them some flexibility.
Yeah. And you say new and different. Dakereon Joyner's played pretty much every skill position on this offense. So while it's a new concept to him, it's not something that's completely foreign to him either.
Yeah, you basically added tight end, which for him, his size is kind of like an H-back type role. You added that to his long list of things that he's done.
But that position in and of itself factors a lot into pass blocking as well, which we know Dakereon Joyner is really good at. And while, again, Mario Anderson has definitely emerged as the better true running back, I'll be interested to see how things are affected tomorrow without having DK back there to offer some of his prowess at pass blocking.
Yeah, so I think if Trey Knox is on that pitch count, then what kind of happens in those scenarios where you would have been in 2 tight ends, and then last week you replaced Joyner into that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Now Joyner's not playing this week. Is it okay? Those maybe Trey Knox. Maybe only Trey Knox is out there in those 2 tight end situations, and you use Simon as your primary tight end, so that way you can limit the snaps for Knox and sort of have him on that pitch count. Maybe that means more Connor Cox. He played, I think, just under 10 snaps last week.
Yep.
And so, I think that opens up the door for him a little bit. But are you also on a game count sort of with Cox, because he's closing in on being over the redshirt threshold? He won't go over it this week, but just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And then as far as your true running back rotation, do we get to see some DJ Braswell? He played one snap at running back last week, and I'm not going to lie. When I saw 23 run out there, because I've been on the Braswell train since preseason. I saw 20. I was like,
oh, here we
go. Finally, my guy. And
that
then
was the one carry you got.
It lasted. Well, he went outside instead of just following
like
the blockers.
And they're probably like, all right, sit back down.
I don't want to be one of those people that interprets body language.
Sure.
But the reactions I think I saw on the sideline after, and the fact that he came right out, leads me to believe he tried to do a high school run by just saying, I'm going to outrun everybody to the outside, as opposed to just
doesn't work quite the same way in college.
I got a feeling that's probably been something he's been told about in practice.
Sure.
But still really, I mean, I think Braswell is going to be a really good player here.
Absolutely.
And so do we get to see him get a drive tomorrow potentially?
That's something to keep an eye on as well. Last thing here as we wrap up, Chris gave us his score prediction earlier, 37-20. Wes, how do you see this game going tomorrow?
I have the Gamecocks winning by 2 scores as well, just over 2 scores. And I think I picked right around what Chris said. I like staying around that 40 number, 37, 38, 39. Tyler, are you giving your prediction now as well? I want to pull up the exact one. So.
Mine is right around that number as well. I got them 41-20 over Vanderbilt.
That feels right.
Yeah,
I think we're all going to have around the same number. And Chris said 37-20.
Yep.
I know we're running out of time. Where's it at, guys? I have 38-21.
Okay, all right, close enough. Right around that same number there. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show, myself and Terry Ford coming up as Football Friday rolls along here on the game.
Your home is more than the sum of its parts, and creating a truly extraordinary space is about more than picking the perfect products. That's why the experts at Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery are here to help you throughout the entire process to create a home that's as unique as you are. Bring your vision to us.
Schedule your showroom consultation and see more from brands like Jen Air at build.com/Ferguson.